Having weighed all the evidence and considered the devastating impact of your actions, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Marcus Henderson murdered his uncle, Thomas Henderson, and his uncle's business partner, Richard Palmer, in what prosecutors described as a calculated act of greed masked as a home invasion. The victims were found in Thomas Henderson's home office on a humid August evening, each shot twice in the chest. Thomas, age 58, was discovered slumped over his mahogany desk, while Richard, age 52, lay near the doorway where he had apparently tried to flee. What should have been a routine evening of business planning became the scene of a double homicide that would tear apart a prominent Seattle family and expose a web of financial desperation hidden beneath a veneer of success. If you're interested in true crime analysis that goes beyond the headlines, please subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps us continue exploring these complex cases that raise difficult questions about family, trust, and the hidden pressures that can drive people to unthinkable acts. The events of the 17th of August 2019 would forever change the lives of the Henderson family, a well-known clan in Seattle's business community. Thomas Henderson had built Henderson & Associates, a successful commercial real estate firm, from the ground up over 3 decades. His partnership with Richard Palmer had been particularly fruitful, with the two men acquiring and developing properties throughout the Pacific Northwest. Thomas was known in the industry as meticulous and fair, someone whose word was his bond and who mentored younger professionals entering the field. On that Saturday evening, Thomas and Richard had planned to meet at Thomas's lakefront home to review documents for a major property acquisition that was scheduled to close the following week. The deal involved a downtown Seattle office complex valued at $42 million, representing one of the largest transactions in the firm's history. Thomas's wife, Catherine, had taken their teenage daughter, Emma, to visit Catherine's mother in Portland for the weekend, leaving Thomas alone at the sprawling 4-bedroom house overlooking Lake Washington. According to phone records later analyzed by investigators, Thomas had sent a text message to Catherine at 6:47 p.m., confirming that Richard had arrived and they were getting started on the paperwork. The message included a photo of their golden retriever, Max, lying contentedly by the fireplace, with Thomas writing, "Max is keeping us company while we work. Love you." This would be the last communication anyone would receive from Thomas Henderson. At approximately 8:30 p.m., a neighbor walking her dog along the quiet residential street noticed that the front door of the Henderson home was slightly ajar, which struck her as unusual given the security-conscious nature of the neighborhood. Patricia Morrison, who had lived 3 houses down from the Hendersons for 12 years, initially hesitated to investigate, but her concern grew when she noticed that the lights in the home office, typically visible from the street, appeared to be off despite knowing Thomas was home. She approached the house and called out Thomas's name from the doorway, receiving no response. Growing alarmed, Patricia entered the home and immediately noticed the silence. Max, the Hendersons' normally friendly golden retriever, was nowhere to be seen. As she moved through the house calling for Thomas, she noticed papers scattered across the hallway leading to the office. When she reached the office doorway, Patricia discovered the horrific scene that would haunt her for years to come. The Seattle Police Department received Patricia's frantic 911 call at 8:37 p.m. "There's blood everywhere," she told the dispatcher, her voice shaking. "Thomas and another man. They're not moving. Please send help immediately." The recording of that call would later be played in court, capturing the raw terror of discovering 2 bodies in what should have been a safe, familiar neighborhood. Officers Blake Martinez and Jennifer Chen were the first to arrive at the Henderson residence at 8:43 p.m., just 6 minutes after the call was placed. They found Patricia sitting on the front steps in shock, unable to provide much information beyond what she had reported to the 911 operator. The officers secured the scene and immediately called for homicide detectives and crime scene investigators upon confirming that both men were deceased. Detective Sarah Brennan, a 15-year veteran of the Seattle Police Department's homicide unit, was assigned as lead investigator. Arriving at the scene within 25 minutes of the initial call, Brennan began the meticulous process of documenting what appeared to be a targeted double homicide. The victims showed no signs of a struggle beyond their positions, Thomas at his desk and Richard near the door, suggesting they had been taken by surprise. The crime scene told a story of calculated violence. Both victims had been shot twice in the torso at close range with a 9mm handgun. Spent shell casings were found near each body, and the pattern of blood spatter indicated the shooter had fired from a position just inside the office door. The room showed signs of a hasty search, with desk drawers pulled open and filing cabinets ransacked, though it was initially unclear whether anything had been taken. What struck Detective Brennan immediately was the absence of forced entry anywhere in the house. The front door's lock showed no signs of tampering, and all windows remained secure and undamaged. This suggested that either the door had been left unlocked, something neighbors insisted was uncharacteristic of Thomas, or the killer had been admitted into the home by one of the victims. The alarm system, which Thomas typically activated when alone in the house, had been disarmed and never triggered during the incident. Max, the family's golden retriever, was eventually found hiding in an upstairs bedroom closet, trembling but physically unharmed. This detail would later prove significant, as family members reported that Max was generally friendly with visitors he recognized, but would bark at strangers. The fact that the dog had simply hidden, rather than defended his owner or alerted the neighborhood with barking, suggested the intruder might have been someone the animal knew. As crime scene technicians processed the evidence, Detective Brennan began the difficult task of notifying next of kin. Catherine Henderson received the devastating call while at her mother's home in Portland, still 3 hours away from Seattle. Her initial reaction, captured in Brennan's report, was one of complete disbelief. "That's impossible," Catherine had said. "I just talked to him 2 hours ago. He sent me a picture of Max. This can't be real." The notification to Richard Palmer's family was equally devastating. His wife Jennifer and their college-age son Michael were at home just 15 minutes away, completely unaware that their husband and father would never return from what he'd described as a routine Saturday evening work session. Jennifer Palmer would later describe the moment she received the news as the dividing line in her life, the point at which everything she had known and planned for came to an abrupt end. In the initial hours following the discovery of the bodies, investigators worked to establish a timeline and identify potential suspects. Neighbors were interviewed throughout the night, with most reporting that they had noticed nothing unusual during the evening. A few mentioned seeing a dark-colored SUV parked on the street around 7:30 p.m., but none could provide specific details about the make, model, or license plate. This vehicle would become a focal point of the investigation. Thomas Henderson's background revealed a man who had lived his life with integrity and caution. Born and raised in Seattle, he had attended the University of Washington, where he studied business and met Catherine, his wife of 30 years. After graduation, he had worked for several commercial real estate firms before striking out on his own at age 35. Henderson and Associates had grown steadily under his leadership, earning a reputation for honest dealings and successful outcomes. Richard Palmer had joined the firm 12 years before his death, initially as a junior partner, before working his way up to equal partnership with Thomas. Colleagues described their relationship as more than professional. They were genuine friends who socialized with their families and shared similar values about business ethics and community involvement. Richard's expertise in property valuation complemented Thomas's skills in negotiation and deal structure, making them a formidable team in Seattle's competitive commercial real estate market. Neither man had any known enemies, at least none that immediately emerged during initial interviews with colleagues, friends, and family members. Both were described as fair in their business dealings, perhaps tough negotiators, but never underhanded or vindictive. This absence of obvious suspects or motives made the investigation more challenging and pointed toward either a random home invasion or something more complex lurking beneath the surface. The medical examiner's preliminary findings confirmed that both men had died from their gunshot wounds, with time of death estimated between 7:30 and 8:15 p.m. The pattern of wounds suggested the shooter had reasonable familiarity with firearms, as the shots were well placed and showed no evidence of hesitation or missed shots that might indicate panic or inexperience. Toxicology reports would later show that both victims had low levels of alcohol in their system, consistent with each having had a single glass of wine, a bottle of which was found open in the office. As news of the double homicide spread through Seattle's business community, shock and fear rippled through professional networks. The idea that two successful businessmen could be murdered in a quiet residential neighborhood during an ordinary evening struck at the sense of security that many in the affluent community had taken for granted. Security companies reported a surge in alarm system installations and upgrades in the days following the murders. The investigation took its first significant turn on the second day when Detective Brennan received a call from Marcus Henderson, Thomas's 32-year-old nephew. Marcus explained that he needed to speak with investigators about something he had remembered regarding the evening of the murders. This request for a meeting, made with an urgency that Brennan found notable, marked the beginning of a focus that would eventually center the entire investigation on Thomas's own family. Marcus Henderson had been considered successful in his own right, at least on the surface. After graduating from Seattle University with a degree in marketing, he had launched several business ventures with varying degrees of success. His uncle Thomas had been supportive, providing both advice and occasional financial backing for Marcus's entrepreneurial efforts. To observers, their relationship appeared warm and mutually beneficial, with Thomas serving as both mentor and investor in his nephew's future. What investigators would gradually uncover, however, was a far more troubled relationship than anyone had suspected. Marcus's business ventures had not been as successful as he portrayed to family and friends. His most recent startup, a boutique marketing agency called Momentum Solutions, was hemorrhaging money and on the verge of bankruptcy. He had taken out substantial loans against his home and maxed out multiple credit cards, creating a personal financial crisis that he had kept hidden from nearly everyone, including his wife, Amanda. During his initial interview with Detective Brennan, Marcus appeared nervous but attributed this to the shock of his uncle's death and anxiety about being questioned by police. He explained that he had been at home with Amanda on the evening of the murders, watching movies and having dinner. When asked why he had requested this meeting, Marcus mentioned that he had remembered seeing a dark SUV parked near his uncle's house when he had driven by around 6 p.m. on his way home from a late afternoon gym session. This information initially seemed helpful, potentially corroborating the neighbor reports of an unfamiliar vehicle in the area. However, inconsistencies in Marcus's account began to emerge as the interview progressed. When asked why he had been driving past his uncle's house, which was not on a direct route from his gym to his home, Marcus fumbled slightly before explaining that he had taken a longer scenic route because the weather was nice and he wanted to clear his head. Detective Brennan, with years of experience reading body language and detecting evasive answers, noted Marcus's discomfort but did not press the issue during this initial interview. Instead, she thanked him for the information and asked if he would be willing to provide his fingerprints and a DNA sample for elimination purposes, explaining that this was standard procedure for family members who had been in the home recently. Marcus agreed without hesitation, which Brennan found interesting, as truly guilty individuals often agreed to such requests to avoid appearing suspicious. As the investigation continued, the forensics team made a crucial discovery. Among the items scattered in Thomas Henderson's office was his laptop computer, which had been open but was now in sleep mode. When forensic technicians accessed the device, they found that the last activity had occurred at 7:52 p.m., less than an hour before the bodies were discovered. The final document accessed was a spreadsheet detailing various loans and investments Thomas had made to family members over the years. One entry in particular caught investigators' attention. It showed that Thomas had loaned Marcus a total of $340,000 over the previous 3 years, with most of the money advanced in the 6 months before the murder. Notes in the file indicated that Thomas had grown concerned about Marcus's ability to repay these loans and had documented several conversations in which he had asked Marcus for a realistic repayment plan. The most recent note, dated just 3 days before the murder, read, "Met with M today. Very evasive about business finances. Growing worried that money has been misused. Need to have serious conversation about consequences." This discovery shifted the investigation's focus significantly. While the crime scene had initially suggested a possible robbery gone wrong, the financial documents pointed toward a potential motive rooted in family dynamics and financial pressure. Detective Brennan requested a comprehensive forensic accounting of Marcus Henderson's finances, a process that would reveal the full extent of his financial desperation. The forensic accounting team, led by financial crimes specialist Danielle Ortega, uncovered a disturbing picture. Marcus's marketing agency had been losing money consistently for over a year, with no realistic prospects for recovery. He had not paid himself a salary in months and had been using new loans to pay off old debts, a classic Ponzi-like scheme that was rapidly approaching collapse. More troubling was evidence that some of the money Thomas had loaned Marcus for business purposes had instead been used to maintain Marcus's lifestyle, paying for luxury car leases, expensive vacations, and high-end purchases that he couldn't afford. Perhaps most significantly, the accounting revealed that Marcus had purchased a 9mm handgun 3 months before the murders, a Glock 19 that he had acquired through a licensed dealer. When questioned about this purchase, Marcus claimed he had bought the gun for home protection after reading about rising crime rates in Seattle. A common enough explanation that didn't immediately raise red flags, but added another concerning element to the emerging picture. The investigation took a more ominous turn when Detective Brennan executed a search warrant for Marcus's home and vehicles. In the garage, investigators found a dark blue SUV that matched the general description of the vehicle seen near Thomas's house on the evening of the murders. More concerning was the discovery of recently cleaned floor mats and evidence that the vehicle's interior had been thoroughly vacuumed in the 48 hours following the murders, something Marcus's wife, Amanda, confirmed he had done, though she hadn't thought it unusual at the time. When forensic technicians examined the vehicle using luminol, a chemical that reveals blood traces even after cleaning, they discovered minute blood traces on the floor mat on the driver's side. DNA testing would later confirm that this blood belonged to Richard Palmer, placing Marcus's vehicle at the crime scene and directly contradicting his claim that he had merely driven past the house hours before the murders. Confronted with this evidence during a second interview, Marcus's demeanor changed dramatically. His previous nervousness gave way to a calculated defensiveness as he consulted repeatedly with his newly retained attorney, James Kirkland, a prominent criminal defense lawyer known for representing high-profile clients. Through his attorney, Marcus provided a modified version of events, now admitting that he had actually stopped at his uncle's house briefly that evening, but had left before any violence occurred. According to this new narrative, Marcus claimed he had driven to Thomas's house, hoping to discuss the loans and request additional time to repay them. He said he had knocked on the door and been let inside by Thomas, who had invited him to wait in the living room while he finished up his meeting with Richard. After waiting about 10 minutes, Marcus claimed, he had grown uncomfortable and decided to leave, departing before anything violent occurred. He suggested that the real killer must have arrived after his departure, and that the blood in his vehicle must have been transferred through some innocent means he couldn't quite explain. This evolving story did not sit well with Detective Brennan or the prosecutor assigned to the case, Deputy Prosecutor Lisa Chen. They had seen this pattern before, suspects incrementally admitting to more involvement as evidence emerged, always staying just ahead of what could be proven while maintaining innocence regarding the actual crime. The question now was whether they had enough evidence to charge Marcus Henderson with 2 counts. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Amanda Henderson, Marcus's wife, contacted Detective Brennan, requesting a private meeting without her husband's knowledge. During this emotional interview, Amanda revealed that her husband's behavior in the days following the murders had been deeply troubling. He had been unable to sleep, jumping at unexpected noises, and obsessively watching news coverage of the investigation. More significantly, she had overheard him on the phone with someone, she didn't know who, saying words that had chilled her. "They can't prove anything. I was careful." Amanda also disclosed that Marcus had asked her to lie about his whereabouts on the evening of the murders if anyone asked, claiming he had been home with her all evening. She had agreed initially, wanting to support her husband, but her conscience had been eating at her, especially after learning about the blood evidence found in their vehicle. The interview concluded with Amanda stating that she could no longer protect her husband if he had done what she was beginning to suspect he had done. Armed with this new information and the accumulating physical evidence, prosecutors convened a grand jury to consider murder charges against Marcus Henderson. The grand jury heard testimony from Detective Brennan about the investigation's findings, from forensic experts about the blood evidence and ballistics, and from financial analysts about Marcus's desperate financial situation and his uncle's growing concerns about the loans. After 2 days of testimony, the grand jury returned an indictment charging Marcus Henderson with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The arrest took place on a rainy October morning, nearly 2 months after the murders. Marcus was taken into custody without incident at his home, where he had been preparing for a court appearance in a civil lawsuit related to his failing business. Television cameras captured him being led away in handcuffs. The once successful entrepreneur, now accused of murdering his uncle and his uncle's business partner in a desperate attempt to escape his financial problem. The arrest sent shockwaves through the Henderson family, dividing them along painful lines. Thomas's widow, Catherine, publicly stated her belief in Marcus's guilt, citing the evidence and her own growing suspicions about financial irregularities she had discovered while going through Thomas's papers. Marcus's parents, Gerald and Patricia Henderson, Thomas's younger brother and sister-in-law, struggled with conflicting loyalties, wanting to support their son while grappling with mounting evidence of his involvement in Thomas's death. The pretrial period stretched over 10 months, filled with legal motions, evidence hearings, and failed plea negotiation attempts. The defense team, led by James Kirkland, attempted to suppress various pieces of evidence and challenge the admissibility of Amanda's statements about her husband, arguing spousal privilege. Most of these motions were denied by Judge William Foster, who ruled that the evidence had been properly obtained and that Amanda had voluntarily provided information without coercion. One of the most contentious pretrial issues involved Marcus's financial records. The defense argued that the prosecution was painting an unfairly negative picture of Marcus's business situation and that many entrepreneurs faced financial challenges without resorting to violence. Judge Foster ultimately ruled that the financial evidence was admissible as establishing motive, though he imposed some limitations on how prosecutors could characterize Marcus's business acumen to avoid prejudicing the jury. The trial of Marcus Henderson began on the 4th of August 2020, almost exactly 1 year after the murders of Thomas Henderson and Richard Palmer. The King County Superior Court courtroom was packed with media, family members, and interested observers, eager to see how this family tragedy would unfold in the criminal justice system. Judge Foster, known for running an efficient courtroom while ensuring both sides received fair treatment, called the proceedings to order at precisely 9 a.m. The jury selection process had taken 3 days, with both sides carefully examining potential jurors for any biases regarding family crimes, business disputes, or firearms. The final jury consisted of 7 women and 5 men, ranging in age from 28 to 67, with diverse professional backgrounds, including a retired teacher, a software engineer, a small business owner, and a nurse, among others. Lead prosecutor Lisa Chen opened the state's case with a powerful narrative that connected Marcus Henderson's mounting financial desperation to the murders of 2 men who had done nothing but try to help him. "This case is about a man who valued money more than family," Chen told the jury. When Thomas Henderson, a successful businessman who had built his wealth through hard work and integrity, his nephew realized had been lying to him about how loan money was being used, he did what any responsible person would do. He asked for accountability. He asked for the truth. And for that, Thomas Henderson and his business partner Richard Palmer paid with their lives. Chen outlined the prosecution's case methodically, explaining how they would prove that Marcus had gone to his uncle's house that evening not to ask for more time, as he claimed, but to ensure that his financial misdeeds would never be exposed. She described the evidence they would present, from the blood in Marcus's vehicle to the financial records showing his desperation, from the recently purchased gun that had never been recovered, to the evolving stories Marcus had told as each piece of evidence emerged. "The defense will tell you that the evidence is circumstantial," Chen acknowledged, "that there's no eyewitness to the actual shootings, no confession, no clear smoking gun. But circumstantial evidence can be even more powerful than direct evidence because it doesn't depend on the reliability of a single witness or the interpretation of a single statement. When you look at all the evidence together, the financial pressure, the lies, the presence at the crime scene, the blood in his vehicle, the missing murder weapon that matches the type of gun he purchased, you'll see that it all points in one direction and one direction only, to Marcus Henderson as the person who murdered his uncle and Richard Palmer." The defense's opening statement, delivered by James Kirkland, attempted to reframe the narrative as a rush to judgment by investigators who had fixated on Marcus too quickly and ignored other possibilities. "Marcus Henderson is guilty of many things," Kirkland admitted in a candor that seemed designed to build credibility with the jury. "He's guilty of poor business judgment. He's guilty of taking loans he couldn't repay. He's guilty of being embarrassed about his failures and not being honest with his family about his financial problems. But being a failed entrepreneur does not make him a murderer." Kirkland challenged each piece of the prosecution's evidence, suggesting alternative explanations for the blood in Marcus's vehicle. Perhaps Richard had touched something in the house before the murders, and Marcus had unknowingly transferred trace amounts. Questioning the reliability of financial motive, many people face financial stress without committing violence, and emphasizing the absence of the actual murder weapon or any forensic evidence definitively placing Marcus in Thomas's office at the time of the shootings. The prosecution wants you to believe that Marcus Henderson, a man with no history of violence, no criminal record, someone who had never even been in a fight, suddenly became a cold-blooded killer who could shoot his beloved uncle and an innocent bystander, Kirkland argued. That requires you to believe that people can transform completely in a moment of financial stress. But the evidence will show that Marcus, for all his faults, is not capable of what the prosecution accuses him of. The prosecution's case began with testimony from Patricia Morrison, the neighbor who had discovered the bodies. Her emotional recounting of that evening set a somber tone, and her description of finding Thomas and Richard set the factual foundation for the case. Following her testimony, Detective Brennan took the stand for 2 full days, walking the jury through the investigation, step by step, from the initial crime scene to the evidence that eventually focused suspicion on Marcus. Brennan's testimony was particularly effective in establishing the timeline of events. Using phone records, security camera footage from nearby homes, and witness statements, she showed that Marcus's vehicle had been in the vicinity of Thomas's house between 7:30 and 8:00 p.m., precisely during the window when the murders occurred. She explained how Marcus's initial story, the house about merely driving past the house briefly, and how each modification came only after evidence emerged that contradicted his previous version. The forensic evidence proved crucial to the prosecution's case. DNA expert Dr. Rachel Kim testified about the blood found in Marcus's SUV, explaining how the testing definitively matched it to Richard Palmer, and how the location of the blood, on the driver's side floor mat, was inconsistent with innocent transfer. For blood to be present in that location, Dr. Kim explained, there would need to be direct contact between the source of the blood and the floor mat, or transfer from something like a shoe that had stepped in blood. The defendant's explanation that he somehow unknowingly transferred trace amounts from random contact doesn't align with the physical evidence. Ballistics expert Thomas Rivera testified about the shell casings found at the scene, identifying them as having been fired from a Glock 9mm handgun, the same type Marcus had purchased 3 months before the murders. While Marcus's specific gun had never been recovered, he had reported it stolen in the days following the murders, a claim that investigators viewed with extreme skepticism given the timing. Rivera noted that no police report of the theft had been filed until after Marcus became aware that investigators were interested in his firearm purchase. The financial testimony proved particularly damaging to Marcus's defense. Daniel Ortega, the forensic accountant, spent an entire day explaining Marcus's financial situation in detail, showing how he had been trapped in an escalating spiral of debt and deception. Using charts and graphs that made the complex information accessible to the jury, Ortega demonstrated how Marcus had no realistic way to repay the $340,000 he owed Thomas, and how Thomas's recent inquiries had threatened to expose the misuse of loan funds. In the weeks before the murders, Ortega testified, Marcus Henderson was facing a financial catastrophe. His business was failing, he had no income, and he was about to be exposed as having essentially defrauded his uncle by misrepresenting how loan money would be used. Bank records show that money Thomas thought was going to business investments was actually paying for luxury vehicles, expensive dinners, and vacations. Marcus was living a lifestyle he couldn't afford, funded by loans he obtained under false pretenses. Perhaps the most emotionally charged testimony came from Catherine Henderson, Thomas's widow. Composed but clearly devastated, Catherine described her marriage to Thomas, his generous nature, and his relationship with Marcus. Thomas always wanted to help family, she testified, her voice breaking slightly. When Marcus started his business, Thomas was so proud. He believed in giving family members opportunities, even when it meant taking financial risks. He trusted Marcus because he was family. Catherine then described her husband's growing concerns in the months before his death. Thomas mentioned several times that something didn't add up with Marcus's business. He said Marcus was evasive when asked direct questions about finances. About 2 weeks before, she paused, composing herself. Before Thomas died, he told me he was worried he had made a mistake trusting Marcus with so much money. He said he was going to have a difficult conversation with him. Under cross-examination, Kirkland attempted to suggest that Catherine might be influenced by grief and anger, seeing Marcus's financial failures as more sinister than they actually were. But Catherine held firm, insisting that her concerns were based on concrete evidence she had found in Thomas's files after his death. Evidence of lies and misrepresentations that went beyond simple business failure. The prosecution also called Amanda Henderson, Marcus's wife, whose testimony proved devastating to the defense. Amanda described her husband's behavior after the murders, including his insomnia, his obsessive news-watching, and most damning, the phone conversation she had overheard, in which Marcus said, "They can't prove anything. I was careful." She also testified about Marcus asking her to provide him with an alibi, telling her to say he had been home all evening if anyone asked. During cross-examination, Kirkland aggressively challenged Amanda's testimony, suggesting that her interpretation of the overheard conversation was colored by suspicion and that the request for an alibi was simply a frightened man's response to becoming a suspect, not evidence of guilt. He also implied that Amanda might have her own motivations for cooperating with prosecutors, including potential financial benefits and avoiding charges for initially providing false statements. However, Amanda remained steady, insisting that she was testifying truthfully despite the personal cost of potentially sending her husband to prison. The defense's case focused primarily on reasonable doubt rather than presenting an alternative theory of the crime. They called character witnesses who testified about Marcus's gentle nature and his close relationship with Thomas before the financial problems began. Several of these witnesses described Marcus as devastated by his uncle's death, hardly the reaction one would expect from the killer. The defense also presented their own financial expert, who argued that while Marcus's business was struggling, his situation wasn't as dire as the prosecution suggested, and that many entrepreneurs face similar challenges without resorting to violence. This expert suggested that Marcus still had potential paths to financial recovery that didn't require his uncle's death, though, under cross-examination, the expert had to concede that none of these theoretical options addressed the immediate problem of the loans coming due. Most controversially, the defense called Marcus himself to testify, a risky decision that Kirkland had apparently concluded was necessary given the weight of the prosecution's evidence. Marcus's testimony lasted 2 days and included lengthy direct examination in which he attempted to explain his financial decisions and his presence at his uncle's house on the evening of the murders. "I made mistakes," Marcus testified, speaking directly to the jury. "I borrowed money I couldn't repay. I wasn't honest about how I used some of it. I'm deeply ashamed of that. But I didn't kill anyone. I couldn't. Thomas was like a second father to me. When I went to his house that evening, I was going to finally be honest with him about everything, to ask for his help in figuring out a way forward. But when I got there and saw he was in a meeting with Richard, I lost my nerve. I waited in the living room for maybe 10 minutes, then left. I was a coward. I should have stayed and faced the conversation. If I had." His voice broke with emotion. "Maybe Thomas and Richard would still be alive, because whoever came after me would have found me there too." This testimony represented Marcus's attempt to explain his presence at the scene while maintaining his innocence. However, the prosecution's cross-examination, conducted by Lisa Chen herself, proved brutal. Chen methodically took Marcus through each version of his story, highlighting the changes and evolution that had occurred only as evidence emerged. She confronted him with his purchase of the gun and his convenient claim that it had been stolen. She challenged his explanation for the blood in his vehicle and his inability to provide specifics about this supposed innocent transfer. "Mr. Henderson," Chen said at one point, "you've given this jury 3 different versions of what happened that evening. First, you were just driving by. Then you stopped briefly but stayed in the living room. Now you're telling us you went there to confess everything to your uncle. Which version should we believe? And how can we trust that this third version is finally the truth?" Marcus struggled to provide convincing answers, often falling back on claims that he had been confused, traumatized, and trying to protect himself from being falsely accused. The more he talked, the less credible he appeared, particularly when Chen caught him in contradictions about specific times and details that undermined his carefully constructed narrative. The trial's conclusion came after 4 weeks of testimony. Closing arguments spanned 2 days, with both sides making their final appeals to the jury. Lisa Chen's closing was powerful and methodical, walking the jury through each piece of evidence and showing how they all pointed consistently toward Marcus's guilt. "Defense counsel has argued that the evidence is circumstantial," Chen said in her closing. "But let me remind you what circumstantial evidence really means. If you wake up in the morning and see snow on the ground, you didn't witness it snowing, but you can conclude with certainty that it snowed. that's circumstantial evidence. In this case, we have not just snow on the ground, we have footprints leading directly to Marcus Henderson's door. We have his financial desperation, his lies to his uncle, his presence at the scene during the murders, his victim's blood in his vehicle, his purchase of a weapon matching the murder weapon, his constantly changing story, and his own wife's testimony about his suspicious behavior afterward. James Kirkland's closing argument emphasized the reasonable doubt standard and the absence of direct evidence. The prosecution has built a circumstantial case, he argued, but circumstances can be misleading. Yes, Marcus had financial problems, but he's not the first person to face such challenges. Yes, he was at his uncle's house that evening, but he left before any violence occurred. The blood in his vehicle might have gotten there any number of ways. The real killer, the person who actually pulled the trigger, has never been identified. Investigation focused too quickly on Marcus and ignored other possibilities. The jury received the case on a Friday afternoon and deliberated through the weekend, indicating to the court that they were carefully considering all the evidence. On Monday morning, after approximately 11 hours of deliberation, they sent word that they had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly, with family members from both sides present, except for Marcus's elderly parents, who had found the trial too emotionally devastating to attend the verdict. When the jury foreman, a retired engineer, stood to announce the verdict, the courtroom fell completely silent. On the charge of murder in the first degree of Thomas Henderson, we the jury find the defendant, Marcus Henderson, guilty. A gasp went through the courtroom, quickly silenced by Judge Foster's stern look. The foreman continued, on the charge of murder in the first degree of Richard Palmer, we find the defendant guilty. Marcus's reaction was one of shock and disbelief. He slumped in his chair, shaking his head slowly, as if unable to comprehend what he had just heard. His attorney placed a hand on his shoulder while the judge polled each juror individually, confirming their agreement with the verdicts. Catherine Henderson, sitting in the front row, closed her eyes and bowed her head, finally having some measure of justice for her husband's death. In the weeks between the verdict and sentencing, victim impact statements were prepared by family members and friends of both Thomas Henderson and Richard Palmer. Jennifer Palmer, Richard's widow, wrote a particularly moving statement, describing how her husband's murder had devastated their family and robbed their son of his father's guidance during crucial young adult years. The sentencing hearing took place 6 weeks after the verdict. Judge Foster's courtroom was again filled to capacity as multiple people spoke about the impact of Marcus's crimes. Catherine Henderson spoke about the impossible void left by Thomas's death and how Marcus's betrayal had compounded the family's grief. We didn't just lose Thomas to violence, she said. We lost him to a betrayal by someone he loved and trusted, someone he had tried to help. That makes the loss even more unbearable. Michael Palmer, Richard's son, delivered a powerful statement about how his father's murder had derailed his life and left him struggling with anger and questions that would never be answered. My father was at that house as a favor to his business partner, Michael said, his voice steady despite obvious emotion. He had nothing to do with Marcus Henderson's financial problems. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he paid for that with his life. The person responsible for that needs to be held fully accountable. Marcus was given an opportunity to address the court before sentencing. Standing at the defense table, he maintained his innocence while expressing regret for his financial deceptions. I did not kill my uncle or Richard Palmer, he stated firmly. But I understand that the jury believed otherwise, and I have to accept that reality. I am sorry for the pain my financial mistakes caused my family. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a like. Your one like motivates us to bring you even more powerful stories. And if you enjoy real-life stories, mysterious deaths, and tales based on true events, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, hit the bell icon, so whenever we bring a new story, you're the first one to know. See you in the next video. with another true and deeply moving story. Until then, take care and stay close to the truth.